Now, it's the exciting part because we've done talking about the basic version and now let's talk about the universal version. The first four panels are practically identical with the basic ones. However, in the universal version, we've got extra two panels at the bottom, and that is profile and adapter. You'll also notice a new tab on the bone manager called limbs. Just like the basic version, we have designed the extra two panels to have a top-down approach. We start with the profile and we finish with the adapter. Of course, just like what we did in the basic version, the first thing we need to do is to register the bones. However, if you've done so and you've got the rest pose like I have right here, you can then go on to the next step. If you haven't, please check the technical instruction for the basic version. So, the next thing we're going to deal with is the limbs tab inside the bone manager panel. We'll be provided with 8 input boxes, with each of them labeled intuitively, at least for humans. We've got the upper arm, hand, thigh, and foot, each for the left and right side. However, you might be asking, what is deaf bones? Well, every rig, most of the time, has its deaf or deformation bones separate with its control bones. Of course, you have to figure out where they are in your particular rig. As I mentioned earlier, my Athena rig is built with Rigify, and in case of Rigify, its deformation bones are placed inside this bone group. Just activate it and then we'll see the deformation bones. Now, we can select the deformation bones accordingly. This is the left upper arm and it's called Def Upper Arm L. We can then just copy and paste its name to the correct input box. Then we'll go to the left hand, which is this one, and it's called Def Hand L. We can then just do the same thing, copy and paste to the corresponding input box. We can go on with the thigh and the foot. Now, we can do the exact same thing for the right side. Now that we have done that, you may be asking, what are we gonna do with the deaf bones? Well, if you have poses created with the basic version, those poses haven't really had the deaf bones saved inside of them. We can check it in the pose details and change this drop-down box to limbs. As you can see, the limbs are still empty. So, what we're gonna do now is to add the deaf bones' bone transform property into the pose data. In my case, I have all these 10 full body basic poses which now need to be updated. To do that, just like what we would use when we want to add or edit anything to the pose data, we can use the update pose button. We just have to click the pose and then click the update pose button next to the pose we want to update. And then check the yes, I want to override it checkbox and it's done. If we go check it on the pose details, you would see that now the rest pose already has the deaf bones inside of it. We can then update all the rest. However, when we want to update the next post and we load it, you would notice that the def bones we have registered are gone from the limbs tab. So if you then click the update post button now, nothing would really happen because the limbs are now still empty. The reason for that is because, just like what I explained on the loading option, in normal mode, when we load a post, it basically removes the old registry, including the def bones, and replaces it with a new one. In this case, though the rest post already has the def bones registered inside it, but the post one doesn't. So when we load it, it will still be empty. To do this correctly, we can use this small checkbox called Lock or Unlock Def Bones. By turning it on, we basically lock the def bones from disappearing when we load a post without them inside it. So let's reload the rest post and turn on the Lock Def Bones checkbox. Now, when we load the post 1, as you can see, the def bones now remain on the panel. This way, we can then go on updating all the rest correctly. Okay, despite all that, if you haven't watched my technical instruction video for the basic version, I'm here to remind you that updating posts is still a tricky business. Please check it out to see why. Okay, next we go to the Profile Manager. Just like what we did on the Bone Manager panel, the first thing we need to do here is to register the bones to Profile. There are two ways of doing it. From selected bones on the scene with this button, Register, or simply from the registered bones in the Bone Manager with this button, Load. Because we have already registered the bones properly in the Bone Manager, we'll go with the latter for this demonstration. Now, the bones have been registered. Then you might be wondering, what is this XYZ thing I'm looking at? What we're gonna do here is profiling. I know that it sounds like a very technical thing, but simply put, profiling is basically aligning local orientation of a specific bone to the global orientation. I know that it doesn't really help you much to understand what profiling is, but first, let's figure out what is global orientation. Okay, now let's create a new file with the standard cube and let's view it from the front view because that's how we view things in Blender. Now, let's take a look at these lines, red and green. That represents XYZ global orientation, with X being the red and Y being the green. You may be wondering, it's XYZ, right? So where is the Z? By default, it's hidden. But if we go to the Show Overlays and check the Z checkbox, we will now see the blue line, which represents the Z axis. The other way of doing it is that we can actually see it on this gadget on the top right corner. We would now notice that there are 6 dots on the gadget, with 3 of them having handles and letters written on, while the other 3 not having handles and not having letters. The ones with the handles and letters are the positives, while the other three are the negatives. So these axes do have direction. When they're viewed from the front view, the X points to the right, the Y points to the back, and the Z points to the top. So now let's play with our cube to prove it. If we increase the X location, the cube moves to the right. If we increase the Y location, it moves to the back. And if we increase the Z location, it moves to the top. The reverse is true for the negatives. So that's basically how global orientation works. Now let's go back to our rig. So the thing is, when it comes to a rig, it does have a global orientation which we can play around in the object properties, just like what we did with the cube earlier. But when we enter the pose mode, of course, we still can control the rig on the object properties. But in here, we would like to control the individual bones and not the rig object itself. And the bones use a different kind of orientation, and that is local orientation, which we control under the bone properties. For this demonstration, let's pick a control bone like this one, the head. If we increase the X location, it moves to the right. So far, it's the same as the global orientation. Now, let's increase the Y location, and it apparently moves to the top, which is not how it works in global orientation. Now, let's increase the Z location, and it apparently moves to the front, which is also not how it works in global orientation. So now it's apparent that the local orientation of the head and the global orientation are not exactly aligned. That's basically what Profile Manager does. It aligns the bones local to global orientation. But how do we align them? Okay, remember that in the global orientation, XYZ axis sequence means moving to the right, to the back, and to the top. We can actually use this widget to help us remember them. So, to align the head's local to global orientation, we will have to figure out what local axis sequence moves it to the right, to the back, and to the top. So, now let's figure it out. The global X is already correct because it moves to the right. But what about the global Y, which supposedly moves the head to the back? Well, we know that the local Z moves the head to the front, so the negative Z will move it to the back. So now let's input negative Z to the global Y input box. So what about the global Z, which supposedly moves the head to the top? Well, we know that the local Y moves the head to the top, so we can just input Y to the global Z input box. Okay, we've got them all. The head's X, negative Z, Y local orientation aligns to XYZ global orientations. And that's basically what we do with profiling. Okay, now I know that you're thinking, well, that's a tedious job, right? I mean, that takes like 5 minutes to do just one bone. We've got dozens here. Well, yes, it is a tedious job, so that's why we created this checkbox, Auto Profile. First, let's delete all these. Now, we can check the Auto Profile checkbox, and then we can click this button to register the bones from the Bone Manager. And voila, it's done. Now, every registered bone has its local orientation aligned appropriately with the global orientation. We can check the head, and it's already been set to X, negative Z, and Y, just like what we did earlier. That's much easier to do, isn't it? However, here's the caveat of this auto profile. We should check for inconsistencies. The thing is, auto profile is great for like 99% of the time, but it does have one limitation. It gets confused when a certain bone is angled in a confusing way. One of the most common instances is actually the thumbs. You see, if we turn on the axis on the viewport display, we would see that the thumb's local orientation is kind of confusing, even for us. If I ask you which local axis points to the global X, it could be local X or Y. On the profile, we would see that it assigns the left thumb with X, negative Y, negative Z axis sequence. You may have realized that it's different with the rest of the left hand fingers, which are assigned with Y, X, negative Z. So, to prevent any problem in the future, it's safe to say that it's better for us to assign the thumbs with the same axis sequence of the rest of the fingers. Other than that, it works like a charm. Now, we can save our profile by clicking this button, Save Profile. Choose the name you would like and then click OK. I know that naming a profile is a brand new thing for you, so if you still wonder about what you should name it, please check the unofficial technical instruction down below. Anyway, in case you've got the profile ready beforehand, like I do, you can just import it by clicking this button, Import Profile. Find where you save your profile and click Import Profile. Next, we're going to be dealing with the limbs, not on the Bone Manager, but on the Profile Manager. We would notice that the def bone input boxes have been registered because we have done so earlier on the Bone Manager. However, there are extra 4 input boxes under the IK control bones, hand and foot, each for the left and right side. So, let's just input the bone names. Select the left hand IK control, copy its name, and paste. Do the same for the rest. After we've done all that, since we have saved our profile earlier, we can just update it instead by clicking this button, Update Profile, and check the Yes, I want to override it checkbox, and it's done. Next, we're gonna go to the Adapter Manager. Anyway, Universal version is meant to transfer poses between different rigs. So we will have to get a second rig to use the Adapter Manager. So let's bring in a free rig provided by Blender, Rain. Before we go down to the Adapter Manager panel, first let's set the export folder destination for our rain rig. Now, because rain is another rig, it also needs its own profile. So let's do that. Okay, now you may have realized that there are two identical tabs on the profile manager: source and destination. The source tab, just like its name suggests, is for the source rig of the post data. In my case, I've created the poses with the Athena rig, which makes the Athena rig as the source. The destination tab is for the destination rig, which we want to transfer the poses into. In this case, I want to use the poses I've created on the Athena rig onto the rain rig, which makes the rain rig as the destination. So now we can import the profile we've created for Athena onto the source tab by clicking this button, Import Profile. So that I don't waste your time too much, I've created the profile for the rain rig beforehand, and now we just have to import it onto the destination tab. Once it's done, we can go to the third tab on the profile manager called Match. It's kind of a different tab than the previous two, because in here there are only these two lists. So what is this thing? Well, the Match tab is basically the building block for the adapter manager panel. You see, in this tab we have two lists of bone names. The left one is from the source tab, that is the Athena, and the right one is from the destination tab, that is the rain. In this tab, we'll basically match, as its name suggests, which bone of the Athena rig on the left is matching with the bone of the rain rig on the right. For example, this one on the left, called root, all in lowercase, matches with this one on the right, called the same root, but all in uppercase. After we've selected both bones, we can click this one and only button on this tab called Load to Adapter. Click that and nothing really happens here, but if we check the adapter manager panel, we will see a new row has been created with the match we've selected earlier. Okay, now we can do the same thing for the bones, for all the bones, but I'm not gonna do that in the recording because I would just bore you to death with it. And once you've done that, you can click this button, Save Adapter, give it a proper name, and it's done. How to name the adapter is also the thing I will talk about in the unofficial technical instruction. So if you have any doubts or questions, please check it out. Anyway, I've also created the adapter for this beforehand, so I'm just gonna import it now. Next, we can move on to the second tab on the adapter manager panel, that is Offset. You see, by now you may have noticed that there's a significant difference between Athena and Rain rig. For one, the Athena rig has an A rest pose, while Rain has a T rest pose. The Offset tab is here to synchronize such difference in rest poses. For now, there are only 4 bones that we have to offset, 2 for the arm FK and 2 for the hand IK. But how do we use this thing? First, we have to figure out what axis of the upper arm FK controls the up and down rotation in the rain rig? Well, it happens that it is the z-axis. Next, we have to figure out the number of z rotation so that the rain rig has the same A rest post with the Athena rig. I feel that -30 for the left and 30 for the right is a good number. Now let's go to the offset tab. In there, because we want to offset the rotation of the bones, we can change this drop-down box, select the rotation mode, and find the upper arm FK. However, you would notice that there are 4 input boxes in here. I mean, there are only 3 axes, X, Y, Z, right? Well, yes, but the first box is actually for W value, which exists if you're using quaternion rotation mode. So the row goes W, X, Y, Z. Now let's input the Z rotation value in the 4th box. To input the offset value, we've got 2 options. First, we can do it manually by manually inputting the number. Second, which is an easier method, we can click the bone, which is the left upper arm FK, on the scene and also on the list, and then click this button, Set Offset from Scene. Voila! The rotation value of the left upper arm FK is now automatically transferred to the panel. We can do exactly the same thing with the hand IK controls because they do have the same rotation axis with the upper arm FK bones. For the IK controls, we can just select the FK control bone, in this case the upper arm FK, and then transfer its value to the hand IK control, and it will do the job. Okay, now it's done. We can skip the precision tab for now. I'll show you later how to use it. Now, since we have saved the adapter earlier, if we want to save this offset setting right now, just like what we did on the profile manager, we can just update the adapter instead with this button, Update Adapter. Okay, now the setting part is all done. We can finally test it. So let's go back to our file manager and we can import all the poses we've created for Athena. Go to the pose panel and now we've got all the poses from Athena. Since we've set up the profile and adapter properly, in order for us to use all the poses from Athena to Rain, we just have to check this checkbox, Adapter. Okay, now it's the moment of truth and probably an exciting and nervous moment, even for me who developed this add-on. So first, let's check the rest pose. It looks great. You would notice that the arms are now in the A pose position. Okay, pose 1 to 4 look great, but pose 5 looks like something's missing. First, I believe we have to switch from FK to IK for the arms, but right now they still don't look right. So to fix this IK situation, we can now start using our Precision tab on the Adapter Manager. Precision is basically like the offset, but it's exclusively for IK controls. To use it, the only thing we have to do is to check the checkboxes for both the arms. By default, this Enable Precision checkbox is already enabled, but if you have unchecked it before, you can enable the checkbox now. And yeah, that's it. Now let's give it another try. And voila! Now it works like a charm, isn't it? However, for the left leg's IK pole, I'm gonna bring it a little to the middle, and for the hands, we can just tweak it a little bit so that they sit right on top of the left knee. Once we've done tweaking, and if we would like to save this edited version, we can then create a new pose for the rain rig. Then we can check the remaining poses. Now, you may be thinking, well, that's looking great. However, what if we want to transfer poses the other way around, from the rain to the Athena rig? Now, let's go back to the Athena rig and then import the rain's profile onto the destination tab. Then we will also import the adapter. Once we do that, we can click this button called Swap. Once we do that, you will notice that the columns of the bones are now swapped from the left to the right and vice versa. Not only that, if we open the Profile Manager, you would also notice that by clicking the Swap button, it swaps the Profile Manager as well, from the source to the destination tab and vice versa. Now let's import a pose I've created for the rain rig. This is how it looks on the rain rig, and this is how it looks on the Athena rig. Of course, we'll have to tweak here and there again. However, despite of having to do the profile and adapter setting and the occasional tweaking here and there, which takes some time and effort, but let's put it into a perspective of how much time we will save on posing these rigs. When I created the original poses on the Athena rig, it took me around 20 to 30 minutes to make each pose. And now, when I transferred it to the rain rig, or vice versa, it's true that I still have to occasionally tweak here and there. But it took me around anything under 5 minutes to do it. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about it. Now, I guess that's it for the technical instruction for the universal version. On the next part, we're gonna talk about the unofficial technical instruction.